Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share an update on my experience with the Sony G series 200 to 600 millimeter full frame lens. Now, for those of you that watched my update on the A9 Mark II, you already know what I think of that camera. Best in class full frame, not just sports camera, but in my opinion, best camera on the market, period, the end. But if you're looking for the perfect complement to that, you're looking at it. And it's not just a perfect complement to the A9 or A9 Mark II. This is a telephoto lens that at 2,000 US dollars, I can easily recommend, even though this is just an update. And it doesn't mean it's perfect. There are some issues, but nothing glaring enough that at $2,000, I'm not going to say you need to swallow or accept them. I would say this is worth more than $2,000 based on its performance and its value. So again, not perfect, but for $2,000, I like the weight. I like that the zoom is internalized. Granted, it's at the expense of the length, the actual footprint of the lens itself. But overall, I cannot say, I used to say, that my 100 to 400 G Master would outperform it, and it does in certain parts of its focal range. I also like the 100 to 400 literal range, but at the end of the day, this lens is producing shots I wished that I could pull off with my 100 to 400 that I simply cannot because of it stopping at 400 millimeters. And I don't feel that this is a compromise, even though it doesn't have the G Master name on it. I have to say I feel like it gives G Master performance. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just move it a little bit forward in frame because I do want to bring the G Master back out. This is, to me, a primary point of interest and concern for a lot of consumers to figure out which lens is right for them. And I understand why. It's because the G Master, at $2,500, you have to wonder, is this going to outperform the 200 to 600? Now, one thing I will say in favor of the 200 to 600 is that Sony had time to bake that puppy in the oven. That sounds all kinds of wrong, but hopefully, English language aside, everyone understands what I'm saying there. May not be the most attractive analogy, but they had time to work on this. They had time to come in at a lower price point. This is 2,500 US. This is 2,000. I don't know what that means in terms of your country. By the way, a lot of you are complaining that I don't do pricing calculators for other countries. I'm sorry, that's not the business that I'm in. I can tell you what it costs here in the States. And look, a lot of things here in the States lately have become more expensive because of trade wars, and Sony cameras are one of them. But when it comes to the glass here, I don't think I can recommend the G Master anymore. And I didn't think that I would actually be saying that, in this review of the 200, 600 mil lens. I did believe that the G Master would solidly outperform this. It does not outperform it enough in that, at least up to 400 millimeters for me to say you shouldn't save $500 and pick up the 2 to 6. Now, if you need the range, the literal range, again, of 1 to 4, then that is still the lens I'm going to recommend, no question about it. But if you can live with giving up and starting at 200 millimeters, I think this is the hands down winner. Granted, it's a larger piece of glass. They're pretty close on weight. The biggest downside to the 200 to 600 is a trivial one, which is the lens hood. You may have noticed it's got a giant lens hood, right? Which isn't a bad thing, but they skimped on it a little bit. And I'm going to take it off so you can actually see it. So first of all, there's no catching mechanism on the lens hood itself like we have with the G Master, which I'm going to show you. It just comes off like any normal lens hood would. And that's not bad, but because I've been using, I'm trying to put this down without breaking it, it is a little bit unruly. Because I've been using the G Master for so long, I became accustomed to what Sony integrated there. So I'm going to just show this to you quickly. There's no felt lining on the interior. And again, no locking system. So this is a pretty inexpensive lens hood considering this is a $2,000 lens. Now, again, my expectations have been set by this lens hood, which is superior, in my opinion, by all measure. But again, it's a lens hood. A lot of you aren't going to even care. And then there are going to be pros out there that this means a lot to because they don't want to think about having to get third-party options. I'm not saying this doesn't protect the lens. It does. It's certainly big enough. It's just I'm not sure why the fit and finish on this wasn't a little bit better. If it was to help differentiate between these two, I don't really see the novelty. So there's the, well, it's also a turn on, but that sounds weird, right? But, it's just, you can see immediately I mean, they're both made of plastic, don't get me wrong, but even feeling this, it feels like it's a thicker lens hood, and it just, the felt interior, I'm just, or it's a brushed cotton of some sort. I'm not sure why Sony was like, for the G Master, we'll do this, but for the G series, we got to remind them that they don't have the orange logo. So I don't really, this isn't something that to me would differentiate, but, and also it could just have to do with the shape also, the tapering off, I'm not really sure. But that's one thing that is obvious on the difference. But the build quality on these lenses, I mean, is nearly identical. And fidelity, which is what most of you care about, of course, the most, is, at least in my estimation from having shot this since launch, and now this, at least for the trial period that I've had it since, it's about a week now, I don't see a major difference. So I would save the money and go for this, because again, if all I have to do is talk about, lens hoods, you're kind of getting the picture here. And I'm not, no pun intended, there's not a measurable difference that I would say you're better off spending the money here. This will fit into a gear bag better, but if it's not going to get the shots you need, and this will, that's backwards logic. And both of them are great. That's the good news. But the better lens for me, and again, I can't believe I'm saying that, and this is only the update. It may change in the full review. I may find out something. I may have a use case scenario where it doesn't perform as well, but so far, the 2 to 600 millimeter has done everything I wished the 1 to 400 could. I'm not unhappy with the 1 to 400, but you better believe I'm considering selling it and buying the 2 to 6. So right now, if you're in the market for a telephoto lens, I can easily say this is kind of like the A9 Mark II update, that this is the best option for the money available in Sony's native full-frame lineup. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like on body, I mean, you've been patient enough, but I've already shown it with its giant wobbly plastic lens hood. And it'll sound ridiculous that I keep coming back to that, because it is a little bit ridiculous, but it's the only thing that I can criticize on this monster. And it is a monster of a lens. Don't kid yourself. I mean, it's unruly, but you know what you're getting yourself into if you pick this up, right? You know what you're doing. You know you're spending $2,000 to specifically get one look, to have a specific range. And this thing accomplishes it. And I shot in one session with this for like an hour and a half. Again, all hand holding. And as I said in my A9 Mark II update in that specific session, I got some amazing shots. I'll incorporate them into my final review of the A9 Mark II and probably of this lens as well, because it was just stunning. And this was on, in the first few days of shooting with it. And this is an idiot-proof combo. I mean, if I'm pulling it off. I mean, I have to say, there's really going to be few people that are going to complain about what this is capable of. And you don't have to have this specific, the A9 Mark II on there. Again, you can have the A9. I've also tested this with the A7R III. I don't have the A7R IV anymore, as well as the A7R II. And I've even thrown it on the A6500, because there's nothing wrong with getting even more reach out of this, right? Granted, we're cutting down the megapixels from what the A7R III can do, but it's just a great piece of glass. So I have nothing. This is, again, like the A9 II. I said it already. I'll say it again. I have nothing negative to say about this. That's why I had to nitpick over the crappy lens hood. It really is a very big step forward for Sony. This is something I've been waiting for since they went full frame, and I am just still in awe that this is only $2,000. And a lot of people may think this is expensive. I don't think so at all. I mean, nearly everyone that I speak to in the industry thinks this is a value lens, and I now know why, because after shooting with it, I mean, it produces images that are top-notch, and it does so at a price that seems budget, especially when you bring in the G Master that I've been comparing it to. So, and I don't really have any other point of comparison in Sony's native lineup of full-frame glass, and that's because there were no other options up until this launch. And again, I'm not going to compare this to the 400mm prime. We're getting into another world when you start doing that. I mean, those pieces of glass are for a very specific market. And I'm not saying this doesn't overlap. It does. But if your budget is, not unlimited, or even if you do have a lot of headroom, this is still, in my opinion, going to be one of the best options if you absolutely don't need of course, faster glass. If you do, you know where you have to look. You're a pro. You know what you're going to do. For everyone else out there, you don't need to think about this. And I was trying to point out that when I did shoot with this for an hour plus, I didn't end up with back problems. Wow. I really thought that I was going to end up with back problems shooting this. And I didn't. Every person that I told, I just shot a bald eagle and got beautiful, content, at least where I live now. They thought I actually shot the eagle. What can I tell you? I don't live in New York anymore. So that rounds things out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.